The classroom hums with typical morning chatter and murmur, a mundane setting where readers are warned that this story features strong language. As the narrative scans the room, a brief, frustrated ugh hangs in the air, hinting at the tension to come. A student sneers at Dowan, mocking him for playing games again. Dowan, who feels like puking because he absolutely hates games, can only retort with a bewildered what, as he is caught in the act. The confrontation escalates as others chime in, reminding Dowan he is at school. They label him a game addict, leaving him to wonder incredulously, "Are you kidding me?" Observers take notice of his excessive setup, exclaiming, "Hey, look at his setup," as Dowan juggles his power banks, only to mutter, "You guys." In response, Dowan is visibly stressed, surrounded by his rig of devices as he exclaims that it was others who made him do this. He explains he is a substitute gamer, playing for other people just to satisfy a reality quest that keeps him tethered to these screens. Dowan Ha, the 18-year-old substitute gamer, stares blankly at the chaos around him. He can't help but complain that he truly hates doing this kind of work. With his hands a blur of motion across multiple screens, Dowan begs for it to stop, his fingers smashing against the displays in a frantic, exhausting rhythm. Someone sarcastically praises his skills, telling him how good he is, but Dowan just scowls. He bites back, "Who the heck said that?" Erin Ju, the most popular girl in the grade, casually mentions she has never been good at playing games. Her sudden presence leaves everyone in shock, wondering what on earth she is doing there. A sudden ding echoes as the LifeGame app starts up on a phone. The onlookers are completely stunned, whispering to themselves in disbelief that she actually plays games. As Erin Ju looks at his phone, she notes that every guy at school has had a crush on her at some point, and then casually remarks that he is playing LifeGame. Erin Ju admits she has a crush on someone too, explaining she made a bet with friends but currently has the lowest score. She sighs, feeling like a total loser and assuming the person she likes probably doesn't even know who she is. Dowan Ha is taken aback, wondering why she is telling him this, but she just asks him, while noting how amazing this whole situation feels. Dowan Ha can hardly believe he is actually talking to her right now, so he takes a chance and asks if she wants him to play the game for her. Erin Ju quickly declines the offer, telling him he seems super busy anyway, adding that she is just doing it for fun. Dowan Ha is stunned, thinking that he has never talked to Erin like this before and wondering if her logic implies that playing games is good for him, though he quickly dismisses that interpretation. When she laughs at his confusion, he wonders if he just heard her correctly. Hopeful that maybe he can actually be friends with her, Dowan Ha starts to offer a great tip, only to be interrupted by a friend calling out, "Hey, Erin." A friend arrives and asks if he is with her, but Erin Ju dismisses it, saying she was just waiting for her friend. She apologizes for being late since everyone went downstairs for lunch, and insists they leave together. Dowan Ha watches as she pivots back to him, asking him to play the game for her instead, thinking that he knew this kind of thing would inevitably happen. Dowan Ha realizes she actually knows his name, and as she leans in to thank him, he feels a spark of validation knowing she didn't just see him as a stranger. Dowan Ha's heart raced with an unexpected jolt. She knew his name. To anyone else, it might seem trivial, but for him, it felt like the greatest thing that had ever happened. His internal revelry was cut short by a harsh, mechanical alert: his character had died in-game. Dowan could only stare at the screen in disbelief, letting out a bewildered, "Quiet, huh?" The screen flashed a devastating notification. A death penalty had been triggered, and he had lost the executioner's sword. His mind scrambled to process the sight. What was this? Had his character just died? A panicked scream welled up inside him as the reality set in. Wait, he thought, horrified at the loss of such a vital weapon. The realization hit him like a physical blow. That wasn't just any blade, it was Chilwa's favorite weapon. If that jackass found out what happened while he was supposed to be looking after it, he was as good as dead. Dowan's fears were instantly realized as a hand slammed his head into the desk. "Dowan, USH*T, a voice hissed. He knew trouble was coming, and now, the confrontation was inevitable. It was Chilwa Min, looking down at him with a menacing glare. He reminded Dowan that he had specifically told him to focus on his phone, and now there was hell to pay. Dowan felt the weight of Chilwa's hand pressing his face into the hard surface of the desk. I am sorry, Chilwa," he stammered, feeling his nose start to bleed. He knew right then that he was completely screwed. Desperate, Dowan tried to bargain, offering his own in-game items in hopes of forgiveness. But Chilwo was unmoved, mockingly feigning surprise before his tone shifted back to cold, predatory frustration. Chilwo laughed in his face, reminding him that regardless of his excuses, he had still lost the damn item. Dowan could only brace himself for the inevitable cycle of abuse to begin all over again. Every time this happens, a sharp slap rings out, and Dowan Ha can't help but wonder if people like Chilwo truly think life is just a game to be played at others' expense. Chilwo continues his assault, clearly finding pleasure in brutalizing those weaker than himself, using every kick as an opportunity to show off his unchecked strength. The violence is how Chilwo climbs through the ranks of the school, and to someone like him, Dowan is nothing more than fodder. Dowan lies broken among the overturned desks, feeling like nothing more than a low-level trash mob designed specifically for his tormentors to hunt. Chilwo looms over him, mocking his failure by reminding him that he only had one job to do and realized with a sneer that he'd missed his mark. Chilwo claims he has returned to the game lately, but complains that his current gear is so pathetic that he is unable to kill anything in the game world. Dowan stares up in disbelief as Chilwo demands he secure the legendary Fire King sword within a single week, leaving him stunned by the impossible ultimatum. Stammering, Dowan pleads for sanity, questioning how he could possibly acquire such a legendary item in such a short window of time. Chilwo dismisses his panic, taunting him by suggesting the only reason he lost the previous item was because he was busy talking to Aaron Ju, mocking him for having a crush. With a twisted grin, Chilwo offers a final ultimatum: if Dowan fails to deliver the sword by the end of spring break, there will be hell to pay. Chilwo leans in, his face inches from Dowan's, looming with a terrifying promise. He threatens to humiliate him by stripping him naked in front of Aaron Ju and then beating the absolute crap out of him. Dowan is left reeling, but Chilwo just erupts into maniacal laughter at the misery he's inflicted. Chilwo dismissively invites his lackeys to go grab drinks with some girls, callously ignoring Dowan, who internally seethes at that absolute asshole. Left alone in the classroom, Dowan sits on the floor, visibly shaken and letting out a frustrated groan of defeat. He stares down at his phone, his grip tightening as he thinks, screw him. The screen shows his character stuck in auto battle mode in the swamp of void. Seeing his progress stalled, he vents, screw this game, too. His face turns into a mask of pure frustration, muttering to himself that he really hates playing games right now. Despite the outburst, he finds himself back at his computer with cat ear headphones on, admitting that he's acting as a substitute gamer, but truth be told, he's become totally addicted. With the click-clack of his keyboard, he finds relief knowing he won't have to worry about his bullies for the duration of spring break, especially now that his mother is away on a business trip abroad. That means it's finally time to lock in and play. A knowing smirk creeps across his face as he leans toward the screen, thinking to himself that if anyone wants to know why he's finally so relaxed, well, that's because Dowan Ha, known in-game as Dark Chocolate Pie, stands fully equipped in his level 100 gear, radiating confidence. He reflects on his journey, having reached the absolute highest level in the RPG, and thinks to himself that he stopped playing for a while only because the game had become far too easy for his liking. Dowan might feel like a total loser in his daily life, but when he unleashes his signature 1,000 punches in the virtual arena, he feels absolutely amazing. There is a sheer, undeniable power in his gameplay that separates his reality from his digital dominance. As he sits alone in his room, bathed in the glow of his monitors, he can't help but wonder if his real life could ever be like his game. He dwells on the question of whether he would be a fundamentally different person if he could apply that same logic to his own existence. He shakes the thought away. There was no point in wasting time on such hypotheticals. With a rhythmic clack of his keyboard, he turns his focus back to the screen, ready to secure the sword and wait. What was that? The sudden message strikes, he had been defeated. As he stared at the words "you died" appearing over his avatar, Dark Chocolate Pie was left in complete shock. He couldn't believe it. How had he possibly lost? A chilling, foreboding sensation washed over him. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, and he realized with growing dread that this feeling might mean something truly significant was about to happen. The truth hit him as he read the new update notes. The developers had implemented drastic changes, increasing the level cap to 200, significantly boosting boss difficulty, and slashing legendary drop rates. He shouted in disbelief, realizing that those previous rumors about errors in the boss fights had turned out to be completely accurate. Dowan stared at the screen, his face pale and sweating. He knew immediately that he was in deep trouble. He was so screwed. The system chimed with a brutal reality check. He had been playing for 18 hours straight. With only a can of redoc to keep him going, he prepared to unleash 1,000 punches once more to rectify his failure. He steeled his resolve, convinced that he could take down the Fire King Magma Rose now. He had spent the entire night obsessively figuring out the perfect strategy to finally conquer the monster. The system chimed again, delivering a brutal update that Dowan Ha had now been glued to the screen for a grueling 37 hours, his desk littered with empty redoc cans, Monster Energy, and Ansem instant ramen bowls. Dowan erupted in frustration, shouting that he didn't want these crappy items. He stared at the stats of a rare sword, an item level 100 piece meant for warriors, which required binding upon equip, allowed for 10 auctions, and offered a weapon attack boost of plus 12,000 along with an additional 8.2% damage. He shook his desk in a blind rage, venting that if they made the game harder, they should have at least increased the item drop rates. He couldn't wrap his head around why they would lower them instead. Dowan realized with a jolt that he had figured out exactly why. Glaring at the shop screen, he saw the character upgrade package offering to increase drop rates by 5 times, boost experience, and provide 10 times as much gold. He fumed at the discovery, asking if they seriously did all of that just for money. The system notification pinged once more, cold and indifferent. He had been playing for 64 hours straight. The desk was now a graveyard of discarded coffee and energy drink cans, the remnants of his desperate, continuous grind. He slammed his mouse on the desk in defeat, crying out for the game to just give him a break as the gift cards he had sacrificed for the grind lay scattered across the floor. Exhausted and dejected, Dowan buried his face in his hands, lamenting that he had spent every cent of his money. He couldn't understand why the drop he needed simply wasn't appearing. He let out a ragged, weary sigh, his breath hitched in the quiet dark of his room as he slumped in his gaming chair. He was beyond exhausted, his mind and body reaching their absolute breaking point. It truly felt like he was going to die. The system delivered the final, chilling notification. He had been playing for 144 hours. He stared at the screen in disbelief as the mountain of energy drink cans and ramen bowls grew, serving as a bleak testament to his obsession. The realization dawned on him with chilling clarity: the abysmal drop rate was merely the beginning of his troubles. Time was slipping through his fingers like sand. With barely a single day remaining, the pressure began to weigh heavily on him. Caught in a relentless, suffocating confrontation, he found himself cornered and physically overpowered by Cheel Woo-min. Driven to the absolute brink of his sanity, he could only grit his teeth and let out a frustrated curse as the reality of his situation tightened. The system display flickered, showing the countdown for his item drop boost, a mere 8 minutes left, racing toward zero. Suddenly, a brilliant, searing blade of light descended from the heavens, erupting in a display of raw, fiery power before him. Just as he dared to hope, a sweeping slash of burning energy cut across the air, leaving him stunned and searching for answers. Emerging from the flames stood a formidable, armored entity, the Destroyer, a high-level presence that left him momentarily breathless. The Destroyer looked down at him, casually inquiring about his search for a party, to which he could only offer a hesitant nod. The entity's arrogant demand that he serve as a distraction for monsters struck him as utterly absurd, leaving him wondering what kind of delusional king this weirdo thought he was. Desperate for the entity's help, Dowan Ha prostrated himself at the Destroyer's feet, begging to be taken on as a loyal servant and comrade. He knew he needed someone this powerful by his side immediately. The Destroyer remained stoic, his armored head tilting slightly as he considered the strange, kneeling boy. He let out a thoughtful, low hum. The Destroyer seemed to find the prospect of having a friend amusing. He agreed, accepting the young man's request, leaving Dowan Ha to stammer out an overwhelmed expression of gratitude. Back in the real world, Dowan Ha sat motionless in his room, completely absorbed in his high-stakes session as he navigated the game world's interface. A system notification flashed before him. The Fire King's sword was his. Dowan Ha couldn't believe his luck, letting out a startled exclamation of excitement. But the screen wasn't done yet. A secondary notification chimed, revealing he had acquired a second legendary item, the Fire God Sword. His heart hammered in his chest at the sudden double haul. Dowan Ha stared at the item menu in disbelief, his eyes widening as he realized the sheer stats on the Fire God Sword. This was a legendary-grade weapon, easily boosting his attack power by 42,000, and it was packed with powerful bonuses to his combat skills. His pulse raced, his fingers dancing across the controller as he felt the rush of newfound power surging through his character's veins. He unleashed the blade, and the screen exploded in a chaotic barrage of fire and massive damage numbers, tearing through everything in his path with terrifying efficiency. In the chaos of battle, his companion, the destroyer, reached out for guidance, prompting Dowan Ha to call back, fully locked into the heat of the fight. Deep in the digital realm, a flurry of private messages flashed between Dowan Ha, gaming under the handle dark chocolate pie, and his high-level companion, the destroyer. The two were in the middle of a major transaction, with the destroyer expressing genuine shock and delight at receiving a rare item he had been hunting for ages. Back in the real world, Dowan Ha sat before his computer, a satisfied, exhausted smile creeping across his face as he muttered a prayer of relief for finally securing that long-awaited item. With the spring break festivities finally behind him, Dowan Ha shifted in his gaming chair, the frame groaning under the movement as he told himself it was finally time to catch some sleep before the school day began. But as he started to process the thought of returning to school, reality gave a violent, jarring lurch. The world tilted out of control, and he tumbled from his chair, his body losing all sense of stability in the blink of an eye. He hit the floor, his vision swimming. The sudden, unnatural collapse left him wide-eyed and gasping, his mind racing to comprehend why his own limbs had suddenly failed him. His internal alarm bells went off as the grim reality of his lifestyle hit him like a physical blow: extreme sleep deprivation, chronic nutrient deficiency, and a dangerous amount of caffeine. Flashes of news headlines scrolled through his mind, horror stories of gamers found dead after marathons just like his. It wasn't just the fatigue, the sudden, intense rush of excitement from his game victory had pushed his compromised body to the absolute brink. Terror widened his eyes as the cold realization settled in: this wasn't just a dizzy spell. He was looking at the end. The word hung in the crushing silence of his room, absolute and undeniable: he was dying. The absurdity of the situation hit him with terrifying force. It was the games, the very thing he lived for, that were now stealing his life away. As his consciousness began to fray, his hand reached out into the empty, darkened air, a final, heartbreaking apology whispered for leaving his mother behind. Dowan Ha lies motionless, the harsh reality of his situation setting in. He was actually dying because of his role as a substitute gamer. Suddenly, his eyes snap open in a sharp, reflexive blink, struggling to reconcile the fading darkness with a glimmer of consciousness. A heavy, jarring thud echoes, signaling a sudden shift in his surroundings as he hits the ground. Even in his final, fading moments, his mind churns with lingering spite toward his tormentor, Chilwo, promising that he would haunt him from beyond. Confusion washes over him as he realizes he can still perceive his own thoughts, leading him to wonder if his end had truly arrived. He questions how he can still process these thoughts when a sharp, electronic ding pierces the silence. A mysterious blue interface manifests in his vision, formally identifying him as player Dowan Ha. The system begins scanning his life and habits to determine his new class, leaving him baffled as he stares at the glowing window. The analysis concludes as quickly as it began, the system finalizing its assessment. Without ceremony, the prompt confirms his fate: he has been relegated to the basic class with the lowly title of Powerless Substitute Gamer. A glowing, futuristic notification window suddenly materializes in front of Dowan Ha, presenting him with a prompt for an event quest. It leaves him bewildered, hanging in the air with a silent inquiry. Staring at the floating text, Dowan was completely lost. Except, he muttered to himself, his mind reeling as he tried to comprehend what this bizarre interface was actually talking about. Before he could process the situation, the system responded to his internal confusion with cold efficiency. It registered his mental contemplation of the word accept as a confirmation and instantly declared the quest accepted. The interface continued with its mechanical instructions, cryptically informing him that he would be revived at specific space-time coordinates designated by the manager. A sudden jolt snapped Dowan back to reality. He sat surrounded by a complex array of recording devices and phones, shivering as if he had just been jerked awake from a deep sleep. He stared blankly into the distance, his eyes wide with disbelief as he tried to reconcile the strange system notifications with his current surroundings. The classroom around him was bustling with typical student activity, completely unaware that Dowan had just been forcibly linked to a mysterious new reality. Caught in the haze of his confusion, he heard a question directed at him asking if he would play for them, but the words barely registered in his mind. A girl stood in the doorway, waving with a cheerful "Oh, right. Thanks, Dowan," as she prepared to leave, utterly oblivious to the life-altering event occurring right in front of her. He remained hunched over his desk, surrounded by his recording gear, his mind racing as he frantically wondered, what's going on, while the rest of the room carried on as if nothing had changed. Aranju paused, her gaze lingering on the hunched-over boy with a hint of concern, wondering if he was perhaps just too busy with his recording gear to notice his surroundings. She quickly brushed off the moment, calling out to her friends that she was starving, and rushed off with an apology to the room at large, leaving Dowan Ha completely alone. The classroom fell silent around Dowan Ha, who sat frozen at his desk, the weight of his strange, unexplained situation beginning to settle in. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he stared into the void, his mind racing to comprehend the shift in reality. Suddenly, a glowing interface materialized in the air before him, a character window displaying his status with clinical precision, leaving him utterly bewildered. It didn't feel real, but there it was, manifesting before his eyes, a character window identifying him as Dowan Ha, currently a level 1 powerless substitute gamer. With a sharp chime, the system announced that his unique class special effects were now being initialized, causing a jolt of panic to ripple through him. As the system confirmed the application of his gamer effects, Dowan let out a startled gasp. A secondary notification flickered into existence, informing him that the experience points he had painstakingly accrued from every game he had ever played were now being tallied up. Dowan looked on in shock, surrounded by a swirling archive of his past gaming history. It dawned on him that his entire life spent playing games was finally being accounted for in this strange, new system. A system notification hung in the air, informing Dowan that it was busy calculating his total experience points. The sudden quiet was violently shattered when Cheolwoman slammed Dowan's head onto the desk, sneering an insult at him. Cheolwo loomed over his victim, his expression twisted with malice as he reminded Dowan to keep his attention fixed on his phone. With a cruel confirmation, Cheolwo pressed his hand harder against Dowan's face, forcing his head down. Even through the pain and the humiliation, Dowan could not help but glare up at his tormentor, a silent fire igniting behind his eyes. Cheolwo noticed the look and demanded to know if Dowan was actually trying to challenge him with his gaze. He grabbed Dowan by the collar, pulling him closer and demanding an immediate answer. Dowan's mind raced, clinging to the desperate, flickering thought that all of this misery was nothing more than a bad dream. But the sharp, brutal impact of a fist connecting with his face made the reality of the situation impossible to ignore. Spitting blood and reeling from the hit, the sudden, sharp agony forced a horrifying realization onto Dowan: this wasn't a dream at all. Dowan Ha takes a brutal, crushing blow to the face as the violence escalates, his body reeling under the relentless assault. The impact slams him directly into a desk with a deafening crash, leaving him gasping in agony as he fights to remain conscious. Towering over the broken student, his tormentor sneers that Dowan is getting on his nerves and declares he intends to keep beating him until he feels better. Dowan struggles to keep his balance, his vision swimming and his body trembling from the sheer pain of the abuse. The sudden tension in the room shifts when Aranju enters, appearing surprised to find Dowan in such a state while she was merely looking for her phone. Aran stops dead in her tracks, her eyes wide with shock as she takes in the scene of the classroom violence. Before Dowan can even register her presence, a fresh strike connects with his face, sending his head snapping back. The punch lands with sickening force, drawing blood and rattling his senses as he remains trapped in this waking nightmare. Aran screams out in terror as the physical force of the assault sends Dowan sprawling across the floor, echoing through the empty classroom. The bully shows no mercy, hauling the reeling boy up by his tie and coldly demanding that he stop acting so dramatic and get on his feet. Aranju rushes into the room, her voice sharp as she calls out to Cheolwoman in a desperate attempt to stop the violence, but her plea is met only with the sickening sound of another heavy blow connecting with Dowan Ha. Ignoring her presence entirely, the assailant continues his brutal assault, forcing the battered protagonist down as he relentlessly rains punches upon him, heedless of Aran's frantic demands to stop. Desperation peaks as Aran moves in, physically grabbing hold of the bully's arm to force him to halt his attack, her eyes filled with urgency. The bully sneers, calling her arrival annoying before shoving the broken protagonist away, leaving him to collapse in a heap on the floor, gasping for air. He rounds on Aran with a cold, intimidating glare, mocking her claim to authority and questioning if she believes her looks alone give her the right to intervene, before grabbing her by the hair. As she cries out in pain and threatens to report him to the teacher, the bloodied protagonist watches from his position on the ground, his mind reeling with the necessity of intervention. A singular, driving thought cuts through the haze of Dowan's trauma: he must help her. Paralyzed by his own fear and the crushing weight of the moment, the protagonist struggles against a cacophony of internal doubt, repeating the desperate command to move and rescue her, even as his body refuses to obey. Unfazed by her protests, the bully snaps at her with a foul insult, his intent to continue the torment clear. Finally snapping out of his stupor, the protagonist lunges forward with a sudden burst of adrenaline, screaming for the bully to take his hands off her. Dowan Ha snaps out of his paralysis, lunging forward with a desperate, guttural scream as he lunges to force the bully off his classmate. The sudden intervention catches the aggressor off guard, his expression twisting into shock as Dowan Ha intercepts his strike. The confrontation turns visceral, with Dowan Ha throwing himself into the fray to block the incoming blow before it can land. Every bruised inch of Dowan Ha's face aches, a testament to the toll this ordeal has already taken, but his gaze remains locked on his opponent. Just as the tension reaches a breaking point, a sharp, digital chime cuts through the air, signaling an unexpected change in the status quo. A system notification flickers into existence, confirming that the experience points calculation is complete and that he has hit the absolute limit. Before he can process the shift, the system advances him to a rare class, designating his new role as the promising substitute gamer. The evolution doesn't stop there, his status surges again, elevating him into the hero class as an honorable substitute gamer. Finally, the system reaches its peak, cementing his position in the legendary class as the supreme substitute gamer. With the final prompt flashing before him, a new set of job-specific skills is successfully unlocked, changing the nature of his reality. A hexagonal emblem flashed into existence, glowing with intense energy as Dowan Ha prepared to unleash his newfound ability. The system heralded his specialized attack with a booming notification, 1,000 punches. Dowan Ha blurred into motion, a flurry of strikes connecting with devastating force as the air around him cracked under the pressure of his speed. The overwhelming barrage left his target reeling, head snapping back as blood spattered in the wake of the relentless assault. Nearby, a student looked on in absolute horror, covering her mouth as she realized the boy they had constantly pushed around was capable of such raw, terrifying violence. Dowan Ha, his face bruised and swollen from the altercation, remained fixed in his stance, breathing heavily as the system's power hummed within him. The visualization of his skill intensified, overlaying his own desperate movements with the perfected, high-level strikes of a master, converging into a single point of impact. Still sitting on the floor, Dowan Ha gasped, looking around in utter confusion as the reality of his own strength clashed with the situation he found himself in. A sudden chime echoed in his mind, drawing his attention to a new system notification, a message from the manager, offering him a cryptic gift in return for his past kindness. The message was clear, urging him not to be surprised by what was coming next, a reward earned through his own actions. Deep within the virtual realm, the Destroyer, a formidable force clad in intimidating armor, engaged in a transaction with an entity known as Dark Chocolate Pie. The air crackled with the weight of the exchange as the Destroyer expressed genuine astonishment that someone was actually handing over such a coveted item, a treasure he had been tirelessly hunting for until this very moment. Back in the real world, the tense atmosphere shattered with a resounding chime. Dowan Ha lay sprawled on the floor amidst the wreckage of overturned desks and chairs. Reality tilted as the system delivered a jarring confirmation: the monster known as Cheel Woman had finally been defeated. The interface pulsed with a brilliant blue light, signaling that Dowan Ha had been awarded 200 experience points for his decisive victory. Dowan's status screen updated instantly, displaying a near-total accumulation of experience points, creeping dangerously close to the absolute maximum capacity of 999,999,999,999. Another chime rang out, sharper than the last, as the experience meter finally ticked over to hit the cap, filling the bar completely. A final, solemn notification appeared in his field of vision, confirming the achievement: he had officially reached the maximum amount of experience points. The system didn't stop there. An alert window materialized, announcing a monumental promotion. Dowan Ha had ascended to the ultimate class, assuming the role of the sealed substitute gamer. Staring blankly at the floating text, Dowan Ha gasped, his face bruised and sweat-stained, caught in a state of utter shock. He could only manage a breathless question, desperate to understand what was happening to him. The notifications flooded his vision like a torrent, agilities reaching limits, quests completing, and passive skills unlocking all at once. It was as if the events of that day were fundamentally rewriting his potential. With one final, heavy notification hanging in the air, the system made its final declaration: Dowan Ha had reached the last level. Dowan Ha sat amidst the silent remnants of his struggle as a barrage of system notifications descended upon him, signaling an overwhelming transformation. His health, attack power, defense, willpower, agility, and mana had all hit their absolute peak, while every single active and passive skill was unlocked and a monumental quest was finally marked as complete.